Today at the National Press Club, Minister for Indigenous Australians Linda Burney. With Australians just months away from voting in their first referendum in more than 2 decades, she's campaigning in support of a constitutionally enshrined Indigenous voice to Parliament. Linda Burney, today at the National Press Club.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the National Press Club and the Westpac Address, coming to you today from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, Canberra. My name's Laura Tingle, I'm the club's president. The debate about the voice to Parliament seems to have been going on for a long time, and the discussion about Indigenous recognition for the Constitution even longer. Yet we are regularly told that with the passage of the enabling legislation for the referendum now finally passed, the debate is just beginning. It has already been at times for many Australians either divisive or inspiring. Our speaker today, Australia's first female Indigenous Minister for Indigenous Australians, Linda Burney, plays a key role in steering that debate between now and referendum day. Before she addresses us, however, in this NAIDOC week, I'd like to invite Ngambri, Wallabalua and Wiradjuri Elder, Auntie Dr Matilda House-Williams, to welcome us to country, noting she has this week been recognised as the National NAIDOC Female Elder of the Year.
I want to thank Laura for all the wonderful things, and I'm not going to get soppy and teary. So, and also here, I want to thank my Minister for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Affairs, the Honourable Linda Burney, and to all my friends that are here today, for her and for myself as well, you know, my country, yeah. And so I want to thank you all for being here and welcome to this beautiful land, the land of my great-great-great-grandfather, Black Harry, a wonderful man who paved the way for myself. And I'm here to support anybody who wants to have a helping hand. So thank you all and welcome to this beautiful land, and to my Linda and to my... am I getting dementia?
Laura.
No.
Laura.
No. Laura. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thanks
so much, Matilda, and could I ask you all now to welcome Linda Burney to address us today.
Well, thank you so much, Aunt, for that welcome. And it was wonderful to be at the NAIDOC Ball in Brisbane on Saturday night to see Auntie Matilda get the Female Elder of the Year. And I have to say, absolutely deserved. So another clap. Balam Ambo, Ngunnawal, Ngambri, Yinyamara, Naju, Yirabang, Marang. In the language of my people, the Wiradjuri, I pay respect to the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people and honour their custodianship and care for country. And I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today from all points of the southern sky. I also want to acknowledge my dear friend Jed Carney, Rachel Stevens-Smith, Marcus Stewart, the wonderful Auntie Geraldine Atkinson, Professor Brian Smith, and of course, Justin Mohammed, our first First Nations ambassador ever. So a huge congratulations to Justin. But most importantly, happy NAIDOC, everyone. The theme this year is for our elders. In his landmark speech Beyond the Morning Gate, delivered in 2000, the father of reconciliation, my dear friend, Senator Patrick Dodson, used the term unfinished business. The unfinished business of our failure to recognise Indigenous Australians who had coexisted on this continent for more than 65,000 years. Now, 122 years after the Australian Constitution was formed, more than 80 years since William Cooper had his petition, 35 years since the Barunga Statement, 30 years since Keating's Redfern speech, 16 years since John Howard promised a referendum for recognition, 15 years since the apology, 13 years since the expert panel on constitutional recognition, and 6 years, everyone, since the Uluru Statement from the heart. The question must surely be asked: how much longer do Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have to wait for recognition? When will we finally resolve this unfinished business? As Pat Anderson says, let's finish the unfinished business between us all. If not now, when? We are so close. Our destination is on the horizon. We are just a few short months away from realising the promise of the Uluru Statement, that historic First Nations consensus on the way forward, where 250 Indigenous leaders and elders gathered in the red dirt at Uluru to issue the statement from the heart. The idea of constitutional recognition through a voice is what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have asked for themselves, not the government. Later this year, Australians, you will be asked a simple question. Do you support a change to the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice? Yes or no? Canada recognised First Nations people in the 1980s. In New Zealand, the Crown recognised the Maori people as far back as 1840. In 2023, it is time for Australia to recognise Indigenous Australians. The first question I want to address today is, why is the voice needed? And the simple answer is because the gap isn't closing fast enough. For far too long, governments have made policies for Indigenous Australians, not with Indigenous Australians. We need a voice to change that. We need the voice because we need to work in partnership with communities. We need a voice because we need to do better. And we particularly need to do better by young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. More than half of all Indigenous Australians are under the age of 25. But our young peoples don't start on a level playing field. They need hope. They need opportunities for their parents and elders did not have. They need a voice. Consider this, and please stand in these shoes. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are 55 times more likely to die from rheumatic heart disease than non-Indigenous people. These deaths are completely preventable with access to medical care, proper housing and clean running water. Indigenous young people are 24 times more likely to be locked up than their neighbours. In the words of the Uluru Statement, we are not an innately criminal people. First Nations children represent 37% of all children removed from their parents, but make up only 6% of Australia's children. This number is unacceptably high. And yet the number of Indigenous children living in out-of-home care is expected to double in the next 6 years. And this cannot because we have no love for them. Our people are more likely to have experienced homelessness than to hold an undergraduate degree. In 2020, the number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people locked up in a prison cell was 4 times as many as those who celebrated graduating university that year. 4 times as many of our people with despair rather than hope for their future. Does this mean that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have no aspirations and dreams for a better future? Of course not. This is systemic and structural disadvantage. The suicide rate of our people is almost twice the rate of our fellow Australians. All these numbers sometimes obscure the fact that this is about real people with families and loved ones, real people like Michael Riley. Michael grew up in poverty in Dubbo during the 1960s. He spent time on Talbragar Reserve, an overcrowded place with terrible conditions, and medical care was almost non-existent. Like so many others who were forced to live in these poor conditions, Michael suffered from chronic infections. He got rheumatic fever, a condition which his immune system never recovered. Michael became a renowned photographer, and his work was shown throughout the world. At the peak of his career, at the age of 44, he died of end-stage renal failure. I was very close to Michael. I visited him every day in hospital. I watched him go blind in one eye. His Aboriginality condemned to an early death, a preventable death. I remember being by his bedside with his cousin Lynette when he passed. I remember the injustice of it, and it's what still motivates me to this day. It's what motivates me every day to put one front foot in front of the other, to do better by Indigenous Australians, to do better for future generations. And we can and must do better. Just last month, we saw new data that showed 4 of the 19 closing the gap targets were on track. Just 4 out of 19. Life expectancy, not on track. Indigenous babies born with healthy birth weights, not on track. Finishing year 12, not on track. Indigenous people engaged in jobs and training, not on track. If we needed any more evidence that more of the same isn't good enough, then this is it. We have to do things better, and I honestly believe The Voice can help. We have everything to gain and nothing to lose by supporting the voice, because the voice will be a mechanism for government and the parliament to listen. It will be like a resource of local knowledge and solutions that can help make us better and help make better policies. The great leader of the Gummidge clan of northeastern Arnhem, the late Yunupingu, once said, "They do not listen because they do not have to." It was the truth. Governments don't have to listen, whether it be local, state or federal governments. My predecessor, Ken White, put it well, reflecting on his time as minister, when he said, on key areas of health and education, I saw no reflection of Aboriginal input into the discussions that led to legislation being put to the Parliament and the party room. The voice is about advice. Since 1967, when the Commonwealth gained powers to make laws for Aboriginal people, governments have tried to develop some sort of consultative mechanism, and many haven't worked. The second question I want to answer today is, how will the voice work? First, let's be clear about what the voice is, how it will help to deliver a better future and do better than past bodies. The voice will be independent, representative advisory body made up of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The voice will be nimble, efficient and focused on making a practical difference. That is what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have asked for, to be heard. It will be chosen by local communities for local communities. The voice will give independent advice to Parliament and the government on issues affecting Indigenous people and communities. This will lead to better outcomes because we know that listening to people from the grassroots levels lead to better outcomes. The voice will provide independent advice for better decisions. It will empower local voices. Every state, territory, the Torres Strait Islands and remote communities will be represented. It will be gender balanced and include the views of young people. It will consult with local communities. It will be accountable and transparent, and it will cooperate with existing organisations. One question I'm sometimes asked is, why does the voice need to be in the Constitution? Why can't it just be legislated? Well, there are two main reasons, everyone. Firstly, a voice or representative body cannot be truly independent or give frank advice to the government of the day if the government of the day can abolish it with the stroke of a pen, and we've seen that. And secondly, it's what First Peoples requested in the Uluru Statement from the Heart. The starting point for reconciliation has to be listening to the wishes of Indigenous people. The starting point cannot be a political fix made in Canberra. That's not real reconciliation. Let me give you 3 examples of how the voice will work in a practical way. Practical, practical, practical. Let's say a local community identifies a problem like low school attendance. The community identifies that this is a challenge and wants to explore local solutions to improve school attendance. So the community approaches their representative on the voice and raises this issue with them. The voice then has the power to make representations on how to improve school attendance at the local community level to government and the Parliament. It's about linking up the local decision-making and local knowledge with policymakers and government. Let me give you another area where I think the voice can make an important practical difference. The Community Development Program, or the CDP. CDP was designed in 2015. It was meant to be an employment and training scheme that also contributed to remote communities. CDP supports around 40,000 people across 1,000 communities. In recent years, it's been a failure. It's been criticised for not being responsive to local communities and actually standing in the way of jobs and economic development, because one size does not fit all. It simply didn't work across 1,000 communities. Residents of remote communities have told me they want skills to work as mechanics and to run the local butcher or the bakery. But despite asking for this, despite wanting to work to improve their community, governments have failed to listen. I believe the voice can play a key role in helping to fix CDP. To ensure that it's fit for purpose, we know that listening works. We know it delivers practical outcomes. Let's take another example, birthing on country. Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations have pioneered a more effective way of caring for mums and babies, one that embraces tradition and language so that mothers feel safe accessing medical services early and often, and by respecting and elevating the role of the extended family. Birthing on country has proven absolutely that there has been a 50% cut in babies being born early. Achieving this has been a real success. In the words of my friend Julian Lesser, the voice can help us to understand better what's going on the ground and help ensure that better policy is made that's more responsive to community. Or to put it another way, doctors get better outcomes when they listen to patients. Bosses get better outcomes when they listen to workers. Policy makers get better outcomes when they listen to First Nations community. Much has been made of the proactive representations the voice will make to Parliament and the government. Bringing the priorities to local communities to Canberra will be incredibly important. So will be the requests government makes to the voice. With this, everyone, will be a step change in our ability to deliver evidence-based policy. Policy that is supported by community and makes a practical difference. From day one, the voice will have a very full in-tray. I will ask the voice to consider 4 main priority areas: health, education, jobs, and housing. The voice will be tasked with taking the long view. Unlike government, it will not be distracted by 3-year election cycles. It will plan for the next generation, not the next term. It will be focused on making a better future for the next generation. The time to make generational difference, everyone, is now. We live in an ageing country. Overall, less than a third of Australians are under 25. However, that rises to more than half for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. In the decades ahead, the cost and the consequence of repeating the same mistakes will be amplified. So too will the benefits if we listen and do things better. I want the voice to come up with fresh ideas that can guide us over the long term. As the Minister, when I meet for the first time with the voice, I will say, bring me your ideas on how we stop our people from taking their own lives. Bring me your ideas on how to help our kids go to school and thrive. Bring me your ideas on how to make sure our mob live healthy, happy lives. How we ensure more people have jobs with independence and purpose, and with the independence and purpose that brings. How we strengthen culture and language. How we support families better. How we keep alive 65,000 years of culture and make it stronger. I'll be asking the voice for their input to solve these most pressing issues. So there will be important work in the Voices in tray from day one. It's not going to be a passive advisory body. I want it to be active. I want it to be engaged. We need new perspective to old challenges, perspectives that are connected to communities. We need ideas that come from the people on the ground. We need a voice. As my trailblazing sister, June Oscar, puts it, an Indigenous body gives us an opportunity to elevate our voices in a country where we occupy a space on the fringe of government policy. A voice gives us the ability to address Parliament directly through our connections to our communities and our regions. Now, I also want to say a few words about the No campaign. The No campaign is being run by a group called Fair Australia. It is importing Trump-style politics to Australia. It is post-truth, and its aim is to polarise. Its aim is to sow division in our society by making false claims, including that providing advice to government would somehow impact the fundamental democratic principle of one vote, one value. A claim designed to mislead. My social media, as you can imagine, attracts trolls who accuse me of things like trying to set up an apartheid state. Last month, Pauline Hanson went on radio and said that she had met a true black. To think that this is unimaginably insulting and deserving of anything is really beyond the pale. Because what she was saying is that some Indigenous people are less deserving of our identity. To say it was an insult is an understatement. It was not called out by one media outfit. It was not written about by one media outfit. Do not let the No campaign get away with using Trump-style politics in Australia. Do not let them divide us. Do not let them divide us. The proposed change is constitutionally sound and legally safe. I know it doesn't suit the narrative of the No campaign, but the Solicitor General, who was appointed by the now Shadow Attorney General, has given clear advice that recognition through the voice is not just compatible with the system of representative and responsible government, it will enhance it. The voice builds on well-established principles and practices and standards of accountability and transparency. It will help improve the quality of government spending, better programs and better outcomes. Friends, voting yes at this referendum will be a vote to unify and strengthen Australia. Voting yes will be an act of patriotism, an act of your belief in Australia. We are the greatest country in the world, and we can be even greater if we recognise Indigenous Australians. One of the best things about a modern Australia is that so many of us welcome those who come from across the sea to make a new life here. I see it in my own multicultural community of Barton. We rightly take great pride in welcoming waves of migration over the decades. And generation after generation of migrants have come to this country because they want a better life for themselves and their family. It is the great Australian story. But not everyone has enjoyed these same opportunities. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have not enjoyed those same opportunities. The gap is not closing. Disadvantage and discrimination persist. The good news is that later this year, we will all get the chance to do something better. Together, we can build a better future that recognises Indigenous Australians' rightful place in our country. A better future that genuinely listens to the needs and aspirations of Indigenous Australians. As the Prime Minister said at Gama last year, in years to come, we'll be able to measure the success of the voice, not just by the number of people who vote for the voice, but by the lives that the voice helps to change, the communities it empowers, the opportunities it creates, the justice it delivers, the security it will bring to First Nations people around our country. Friends, history is calling us. And I hope more than anything that the answer is yes. Yes to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Yes to a voice in Parliament. And yes to a better future. I want to conclude by quoting a passage from the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Proportionally, we are the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not an innately criminal people. Our children are alienated from our families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them. Our youth languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be our hope for the future. These dimensions of our crisis tell plainly the structural nature of our problem. This is the torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people to take a rightful place in our own country. When we have the power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to this country. Friends, it is time. Nagali Yahagu, Baranjara, Manawal. Let's get this done together.
Well, thank you so much, Minister. Just give you a moment to put your notes down. If I could start with what should be a simple question.
Thank you.
A lot of white Australians don't actually have any experience of Indigenous communities. They remain, an isolated and strange phenomenon. I was wondering whether you could just actually describe for our audience. You talk about, these better health outcomes, for example. What would happen at the moment, just in a bureaucratic sense? What is the frustration of trying to get a better health outcome for Indigenous communities now? And secondly, you've talked about how you as Minister would ask the Voice to consider health, education, jobs and housing. And I just wonder if you could tell us about how you would see the relationship with the Minister working. I presume you're not going to be instructing them to do that. No. You'd be asking them for that. And what sort of levels of advice? Obviously you've talked about the local community level, but would it be something where you'd be hoping that the Voice could say these are the sort of trickle-down effects of state and federal governments, as well as what a particular individual community might need to get the outcome in that local community?
Thanks for that easy question, Laura. The history of the Voice has been a very long one, and it is not something that has just fallen out of thin air. I have worked in Aboriginal affairs for 44 years, and the relationship that I want to have with the Voice is a relationship based on respect, based on a very proper way of doing things, and I would be asking the Voice and working with the Voice on how we would go about setting up that relationship. But the Voice, as I have said, is about two things. It's about bringing about those practical outcomes, and as Laura has indicated, I've identified the 4 priority areas that I have, and I'd be asking the Voice about that. But the other thing, of course, is that this goes to the first part of Laura's question. The Uluru Statement is an invitation from Aboriginal people to the rest of the country to walk with us. It is an invitation to start this trek across the nation with us. And one of the things that I am really, I have really noticed over the past few years that there is an appetite for the truth in this country. There is an appetite from non-Indigenous Australians, whether they know an Indigenous person or not, to know the truth, to know where they fit. And the recognition part is about 65,000 years. And that is the story of our country. It's not just my story. It's not just Aunty Matilda's story. It's not just Aunt Martin's story. It's not like just Julie Tongs' story. It is the story of this country. And that is why I'm saying this is so important in unifying it, because 65,000 years is unique on this blue planet and is something we all share.
Next question is from Jason Oakley.
Hello, Minister. Jason Oakley, NITV, representing Cam Gooley, our Voice correspondent. Thank you for your address today, and happy NAIDOC.
Happy NAIDOC to
yes.
you. I think I saw you NAIDOC night, didn't I?
You did. Look, referendum are difficult, and historically, WA has been a difficult state to get positive results in a referendum. but is likely to be a critical state to win to get this referendum over the line. With the progress and local concerns of the state's modernisation of their cultural heritage legislation, are you concerned that this work will have a negative impact on the upcoming referendum? And what do you think needs to happen to get a positive result in WA?
Thank you so much for that question. Cultural heritage legislation is a state or territory responsibility, and I make that point very clearly. I am very, very pleased to see that Ken Wyatt has agreed to head up the council that will be dealing with that piece of legislation. I am going over to Western Australia on, I think it's Monday night. I'll be travelling from Albany right up to Port Hedland. And my aim for Western Australia, my personal aim, is to be an honorary Sandgroper by the end of this campaign.
Rosie Lewis.
Minister, I wanted to try and clarify on your 4 priority areas. Will the Voice be completely free to determine its own scope as per the constitutional amendment, or will you as Minister expect it to advise on your 4 priority areas first and foremost? And will those areas be outlined in legislation establishing the Voice?
The last part of your question first. The legislation will be developed after extensive consultation, both with the Aboriginal community and the broader community. And Rosie, I know that you're very familiar with that. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are worried about the big issues. As I said, I've been around for a very long time, and the issues of health, education, housing, and employment are absolutely fundamental to the future direction for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. People are worried about their children's future, about education, about jobs, about medical services, and there hasn't been one community that I've visited that hasn't raised the issue of housing. Josie Douglas, who is a wonderful Australian from the Central Land Council, put it best. The Voice will be changing lives, not changing public holidays.
Karen Barlow.
Hello, Karen.
Hello, thank you for your address. This week, the Canberra Times and the ACM dailies have published a readers' survey of 10,000 people, and it's a low yes result, 38%. In the regions, in particular, we've got papers in Tasmania and Central New South Wales. The result there was 35% yes. In Dubbo, 21%. This result was weighted against the national population, and it corresponds with national polls. What particular difficulties do you see with the regions? How do you talk to them? What do you say to the regions about the Voice?
Oh, thank you for what is a really important point. Can I say this is my experience, and I have travelled extensively, and so have people like Marcus and Aunt Geraldine and many others in this room. When you have the conversations with people and they get to hear what's important about having a say on issues that affects them, it is very, very important. I am glad that people want more information. That makes me extremely hopeful, and it's also extremely appropriate. We are some way out from the referendum, but what I can tell you, I have not caught a plane in the last few months without one or two people giving me a bit of a squeeze or a bit of a smile and a wink. I have not been to a supermarket without people approaching me. The fact that the business community, the union movement, the sporting codes, the faith groups, the civil society are supporting this, I believe, is the real measure of the level of support out there in the community. And people do want to know what some of the information is. But what the two fundamental points to walk away with today is this is about practical difference. This is about bringing about practical difference for what everyone agrees are totally unacceptable outcomes for First Peoples in this country. And secondly, it's about that recognition piece. And finally, there are some fantastic websites. I've written this down, voice.gov.au. Have a look at it. Thank you.
Tom McElroy.
Hi, Tom.
G'day, Minister. Thank you for your speech and for taking our questions. You broke from your prepared remarks, or at least the released version, to criticise the campaign group Fair Australia today. That group has been taking out full-page ads in some newspapers and online, attacking high-profile business leaders supporting The Voice. Could I ask your reflections on that? And are your comments today a signal that you're going to take a more aggressive approach to what you call misinformation and division sowing?
Thank you, Tom, for that question. Look, it's up to Peter Dutton if he wants to tell people what to do. And I'm referring to his comments about the business community. Can I say that I met with the business community yesterday? Their support has been long held. It is not something that is new. It's the business community supports The Voice because they know that it is about employment. It is about making sure that people stay in jobs. It is very much what they're driving through their businesses. And I don't think the business community will be very impressed by the bully boy tactics of Peter Dutton.
Anna Henderson.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you, Minister. Anna Henderson from SBS World News. You have really pulled no punches in your criticism of the No campaign, the opposition leader and those groups which are campaigning against this referendum's success. Are you, though, concerned about how that impacts on those everyday Australians who are yet to make up their mind? Do you risk alienating them too?
The answer to that is that as people come to understand what this voice is about, those two simple propositions of recognition and of practical outcomes, they are the key points. People need to understand that misinformation and disinformation is damaging, and I do not apologise. I believe that the business community, as I said, is important. And I will continue to make sure that the misinformation and disinformation is understood. But you know what? I have every faith in the Australian community. I have so much faith in the Australian community from what I'm hearing and from what I'm seeing, that we are going to have a successful referendum.
Melissa Code.
Hi, Minister. Thank you for your speech. Melissa Code from the Mandarin. I wanted to ask a question which spoke to both the sort of existential opportunity that the referendum offers us, but then also goes to these practical issues of delivering frank advice in partnership with First Nations community. And that was Australia's appetite and sophistication to truly hear uncomfortable things, because surely healing and the anger and hurt that also needs to be reckoned with is a part of that journey.
The government has made it very clear that we support the Uluru Statement in full. There was a sequence in the Uluru Statement which we're also following. Voice, establishment of a Makarrata Commission that would have the responsibility for agreement making and a national process of truth-telling. This country is hungry for the truth. There are such amazing examples already in many communities of truth-telling. There are monuments to massacres. The Mile Creek Massacre is a good example, where the Mile Creek Massacre, I think, took place in 1823, but don't quote me on that. And the descendants of those that did the massacring and the descendants of those that were massacred have come together and built a monument and a walking path overlooking the site of the massacre. It is remarkable. And every long weekend in June, people go out and they recreate. And one of the beautiful things about it, everyone, is that you take something from your garden or something from your place, some sand, a rock, a leaf, and you place it on the monument, and that makes everyone involved. I'll tell you another story which I think is very important and goes very much to the first part of your question. People have made much to me about the lack of bipartisanship, but did you know something? This is about you. This is about you. It's not about those of us that spend some time in that white place on the hill. This is about the conscience of the Australian people. This is about the heart and the soul of this nation. And I went to a place called Flinders Island with Bridget Archer, who is, of course, a member of the coalition. And she took me to a place called Waibelina. I don't know if I've ever been as moved. And part of that story is that is where the Aboriginal people that were still alive, I think there were about 230 from mainland Tasmania, were put on Flinders Island. And only 40 survived. But some of the women used to climb to the top of the escarpment and they could see their home from the island. They could see Tasmania. And they stuck feathers to their arms, thinking they could fly home. Of course, they couldn't. But those stories are the story of this country, and there is a thirst for people to know them.
Brett Worthington.
Brett Worthington from ABC News. In 2019, you spoke at the National Farmers Federation and recalled your experience and Rick Farley's experience of bringing farmers and Indigenous communities together during the native title debates. I'm curious to what extent that's shaping the approach that you're bringing to the Voice campaign.
Thank you. I should give some people some context, I think. Do you want to?
All yours.
Okay, so Rick Farley was my husband. He died 16 years ago, and many of you knew him. He was a great Australian. And a lot of Rick's approach and philosophy rubbed off on me. Of course it did. And what I learned very much from Rick is that the best way to get an outcome is through negotiation. It's about listening. It's about understanding that an outcome for everyone is important. I also learned from him that to have your feet firmly on the ground in this country was very important.
Trudy McIntosh.
Hello, Minister.
Hello.
I'm sure everyone in this room would agree there's overwhelming support for constitutional recognition, but at this stage the same can't be said in terms of the public polling for the Voice. Jeff Kennett, the latest to call today for the questions to be split and that goes to the people. Are you open to that idea? And if not, does this risk setting back the chances of constitutional recognition for a generation?
The commitment from the government is very clear. The Constitution Alteration Bill has gone through both Houses of Parliament. It outlines the question and it outlines the amendments for the Constitution. The Prime Minister has been extraordinarily clear, not since the last few months, but over a very long period of time, that we are doing what Aboriginal people have asked us to do, what Aboriginal people have said, and that is to enshrine a voice in the Constitution and to recognise the extraordinary history of this country. And that is very much the way we will be moving forward.
Josh Butler.
Hi, Minister. Josh Butler from The Guardian. To continue a theme on your thoughts on the No campaign, you've talked about misinformation. Mental health organisations have talked about the impacts already seen on Indigenous people from this debate. Both campaigns are accusing the other of sowing division. Things are tense. Beyond the result of the vote itself, do you have concerns about ongoing fallout or effects from just having this debate? And whatever the results, there are very strong opinions on both sides. How do you pick up after the referendum and heal whatever divisions have opened up through this debate?
I have a very deep commitment and a very deep view that Australians will rise to this. I have every faith, and when we think that it's going to be about practical outcomes and recognition, there is nothing to fear in what's being proposed. We are very conscious of the issues around mental health and just where this debate could go. We've already seen some fairly unsavoury things. But I say these things to you, that the Yes campaign is going to be positive, it is going to be respectful, and it is going to be absolutely about the issues that affect First Nations people. It will not be about sowing division, I can assure you. We have made a $10 million commitment in the last budget because of the issues that we understand could come. We have had long discussions with Equality Australia, who ran the marriage plebiscite, who are extremely skilled and understand what some of the implications are. I have met with all the crisis lines, including 13 Yarn, Lifeline and many others, and that will be a continuing discussion. I have met with the eSafety Commissioner about what is possible online and the way in which we will monitor that. So those things have been done proactively and will continue to be done.
Thank you.
Jennifer Bishrati.
Thank you, Minister. In your view, what are the real implications of a no vote?
What do you mean?
If people were to vote no?
My focus is that people will vote yes.
And if they vote no, what will happen, do you believe?
I can only repeat what I've said.
Sure.
We are in the campaign for a yes vote, and that is where the focus is, that is where my belief is, And I believe that's where the Australian people are at.
Eliza Edwards.
Hello.
Thanks, Minister. Hi. How soon will Australians find out when they'll head to the polls? And you might be loath to get into hypotheticals, but what happens to reconciliation if the referendum doesn't succeed? Would the Albanese government pursue any other path to reconciliation in this term of Parliament, like treaty negotiations? And as Minister, would you want to stay on in the portfolio?
There's 3 questions in that, so thank you. And I'll try and address them. But thank you for your questions. There is much work to do in Aboriginal affairs, and I can only say to you that we are contemplating a successful referendum. The commitment to this referendum is full-throttled. The commitment to addressing the practical issues facing Indigenous people is absolute. The commitment to recognising First Peoples in the Constitution is absolutely 100%. So I am not going to deal in hypotheticals. My role as Minister is a role that I respect, is a role that I understand, and it is a role where I believe much good work can be done.
When will the date be set?
I am the wrong person to ask that question.
Our final question today is from Dan Jervis-Barty.
Dan Jervis-Barty from the West Australian.
Hello.
A question. A big part of the Yes campaign has been to build grassroots support through conversations in the community, through kitchen table conversations, for instance. How do you go about connecting with people, particularly in sort of mortgage belt suburbs, who mightn't have time for kitchen table conversations? They don't have time to read the Karma Langton report. They mightn't have time to even read the newspaper or watch the news. They have other things on their mind. How do you intend to connect with people that mightn't have time to connect at all?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say, or the first 2 things I'd like to say, is the number 1 priority of this government is precisely what you've outlined. It's the cost of living, which was one of the reasons that we're so focused on bringing down the cost of childcare. We're so focused to making sure that paid parental leave is expanded, where there was a very sizable amount in the budget to ease cost of living pressures. But you know what? Governments can do 2 things at once. We can chew gum and we can walk. That is absolutely the case. The connection across mortgage belts, as you've described them, there are thousands of Australians out there doing things that you probably may not be aware of, that I'm not aware of. Things like door knocking, things like kitchen table conversations, things like forming local groups, things like organising events in libraries, things like producing material that's not endorsed by me, that's not endorsed by the government, but it suits those local communities. We have thousands of people out there taking the message out, and I can assure you, come referendum day, the message will truly be out there.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Linda Burney for this.
Thanks, everyone.